A contentious race for U.S. Senate. President Donald Trump defends tariffs and the war in Iran. Questions raised about ActBlue donations. And how will the Federal Reserve react this week to economic pressures? Welcome to the States, powered by the Center Square. It's Tuesday, July 28th, 2026. I'm your host, Greg Bishop. Well, as the days drop off the calendar, voters gearing up for the midterm elections on November 3rd. And there's a lot to consider all across the country. Now, before that election, there are still a slew of primaries. Today, voters in South Dakota have a runoff election after primaries on June 2nd. Next week, Kansas, Michigan, Missouri, Virginia, and Washington all have primaries Tuesday. Beyond that, about 15 other states still have primary elections. Now, the final primary is Louisiana U.S. House races on November 3rd, and their runoff election, if needed, would be December 12th. Now, up for grabs for the midterm election are all U.S. House seats and U.S. Senate seats in states all across the country. Yesterday afternoon, I talked with a Republican U.S. Senate candidate from Illinois. A lot's at stake with who is going to control Congress after the November election, and Illinois has U.S. Senate on the ballot statewide. Joining us to talk about their campaign and what sets them apart from their opponent is Republican U.S. Senate candidate Don Tracy. Don, thanks for taking time with the states, and we've talked to you before about a whole host of things, but it doesn't really seem there's much by way of remedies and solutions to these things. Let's talk about the violence out of Chicago this past weekend. What do you think's driving some of this?
A culture of not supporting the police. I think Chicago goal is like 13,000 police, and 13 or 14,000. They're down to 11,000 or so. So they're 2,000 plus police short. That's part of it. Another part of it is that they don't back the police. There were a lot of defund police there. My opponent has not exactly used those words, but she's all about abolishing immigration and customs enforcement, which is pretty close to defunding police. And she was the head of the committee here in Springfield that created the Safety Act. I call it the Unsafety Act. That basically, lets career criminals seemingly roam the streets of Chicago. They've put in the handcuffs on the Chicago police. And I know that, under the Daley regime, 2030, first Mayor Daley, the police, were maybe not, they needed a little bit of reform too. Because we need good policing, and there are some bad police, but they've gone overboard with this reform, and they make it too difficult for the police to do their job, and come home safely. And they're short staffed. They have these teen takeovers up there. I was, Christmas. They had the lighting of the Christmas tree. Only in Chicago would the lighting of the Christmas tree in downtown Chicago spark a flash mob. They now call them teen takeovers, in which 8 people were shot and 1 killed. And that was about 4 blocks of where I was, south of where I was sleeping. It was in the Loop. It's just crazy. And then you have, career criminals like Lawrence Reed, been arrested 72 plus times for a lot of very serious offenses. And he was still out in the street long enough to try to burn alive Bethany McGee. He poured some kind of liquid on her hair. She ran away, and then as she was trying to get away from him, he lit her on fire. Now, last I heard, she was in the hospital struggling, trying to recover from her burns. And then you have the illegal immigrant that shot a Loyola student there, just a couple blocks, I think, from the campus on the shores of Lake Michigan. Sharman Goring shot and killed her, a Venezuelan, illegal immigrant. And then you have, Katie Abraham down at the U of I. She was visiting some friends there I think she went to Dayton in Ohio, but she's from Chicago. Her dad is Joe Abraham. He's talked a lot about this. And they were just at a stoplight waiting to go, and an illegal immigrant rear-ended them, killed killed her friend, and put a couple other people in the hospital, and then tried to get away. Fortunately, they were able to catch him. He was operating on a fake Social Security card and fake IDs and all that. And, it's just it's a culture of favoring the criminals, career criminals, over victims. And until it changes, I don't see how it's going to change in Chicago.
Don, public safety obviously top of mind for people in Chicago and the suburbs and beyond, but cost of living also
Greg,
something
it really
that's
isn't top of mind.
For
There's a lot of young people there that they've never been robbed before. They've never been confronted because there's a lot of people there, and even though it's a lot riskier there, and it's more likely that it will happen there than somewhere else. If it hasn't happened to them, young people are bulletproof. I was robbed in Memphis at gunpoint. Coming out of Huey's bar restaurant after a football game, and I was trying to close my car door when all of a sudden there was I couldn't close it, and I look up and there's a guy in a face mask, gun to my head, my umbrella. He had pulled it out of the back of my car and was jabbing me in the groin. I knew what he wanted, so I gave him my wallet and my cash. My girlfriend wasn't quite sure. He had to stab me a few more times before she finally figured out that he wanted her purse. And that's kind of a traumatic experience. I can't imagine what it's like to be Bethany McGee, or to be pushed off one of the rail platforms, or to be assaulted and beat up on one of the train lines. I've ridden. I used to ride the Orange Line from Midway. When we had a flight from Springfield to Chicago Midway, I used to ride it downtown to business law meetings, and I don't know that I would do that again. Certainly not at night, but I did ride the Red Line to a Cubs game the other day, and I rode it downtown. But during the day with somebody else, Chicago traffic is worse than ever because I think people are still afraid to ride the trains. Though it's getting better. The feds have said we're not going to give you any more money. The president has said, we're not giving you more money unless you get better safety. So I think they fired all of their unarmed security people, and they brought in real police. And I think that is helping make the train lines safer.
Well, and I want to talk a bit about affordability here in the state of Illinois and what exactly you could do over in Washington, D.C. to help with that in a Democrat-run state like Illinois. But to the public safety issues, what else can Washington, D.C. do if you were to get into the office and you were a state or a U.S. senator for the state of Illinois? What could be done to address the public safety concerns in Chicago and beyond?
Well, more of what I just alluded to was having strings on federal dollars, safety strings, basically saying, maybe we'll help you, get some more police if you unshackle them. If you take the handcuffs off the police and let them do their job, and you get back up to speed, and you have enough police so that when there's a teen takeover, that you can control the mob better. I think a majority of the council up there are in favor of giving the police chief, the police superintendent, that is, the authority to, on the spur of the moment, set a curfew for teenagers below a certain age. They have to be in by 8:00 or whatever the time is. I don't remember what it is. Mayor Johnson, though, has so far vetoed that. He's blocked that. There's just a lot of things you can do that way. Affordability. I like, for the most part, what they've done. The Senate and the House have done in Washington D.C. with housing. It's just the opposite approach of Pritzker and my opponent Stratton. People, they talk about housing affordability. I don't know, Greg, was there much talk about housing affordability a year or two ago or three? I don't know. It just seemed like it's been fairly recent. But, when you bring in 8 to 22 million people over open borders, I'm not sure of the exact number for that. I'll go, more conservative, say it's 12 or 13 million. People that are by definition unhoused. And you bring them mainly you attract them to the sanctuary cities with government benefits and cities that already have, a little bit of a housing shortage, and the housing shortage gets worse and rents go up. What did you expect to happen? And of course, Pritzker Stratton's approach to that is to try to blame it on localities, on zoning, in building restrictions, and so pass a law that mandates. They love mandates, out of state government now controlled by the the liberal Democrats, and so going to mandate that local communities give up their zoning laws and have to give up single family subdivisions, I guess. In Washington, we took a different approach there, and the basic approach and the federal approach was to reduce regulations that make housing more expensive to build, and then put in some carrot funding, incentive funding for localities that change on their own, change their zoning restrictions to allow for more affordable housing. And that's the approach I would rather see. I'm not a big fan of these mandates, unfunded mandates. Illinois is kind of, I think, probably ground zero for unfunded mandates. They do it for everything, and it's one of the reasons why schools are so expensive.
Don, obviously we've got several more months before the November election, but it's going to be here before we know it. Is there any indication that there's going to be a debate between the two major party candidates in this race to replace the seat being vacated by Dick Durbin?
Greg, I have said for many months now that I'll debate my opponent. I used to say before the primary, whoever that is. Now I say it's Lieutenant Governor Stratton because she is my opponent. I'll debate her anytime, any place. But so far, she has turned down every debate opportunity, including one by the League of Women Voters. During the primary, I did 2 or 3 League of Women Voter debates. I did, I think, 5 debates in the primary, 5 or 6. But she's so far refusing to debate me. I don't know why.
What do you think that tells voters?
Well, I guess she's maybe afraid of her of exposing some of her far left stances on the issues. I mean, I like to say her platform is open borders, open jails, and open checkbooks, yours, and that her economic spending plan is $30 trillion with a T, because she wants government health care to replace our pretty good system of health care. It's too expensive now. We need to fix it, but she wants to kind of replace it with government health care and no private insurance. And she's anti-school choice, of course. And she wants to, nationalize everything, including the minimum wage. I think all but 2 states have a minimum wage, and they vary according to, state by state, and they should vary within a state. My hometown of Mount Sterling should probably have a different minimum wage than downtown Chicago. But she advocates, my opponent advocates, a $25 per hour minimum wage in every state, in every town, small or big. What's that going to do to the cost of living? I mean, that'll put, inflation on steroids, I would think. But worse than that, it stops people from climbing the ladder of success and starting, with the lower paying jobs, I mean, I started at age 10 working for my dad, and you're not going to pay a 10-year-old $25 an hour, I don't think. Nor you can't do that if you work for, a company because of, child labor, all that. But, if you start work at 16, mowing yards or, taking out the trash at some restaurant or washing dishes or something, as a 16-year-old, while you're going to school, you can't pay $25 an hour for that unless you're going to, make eating out even more expensive than it is. So I just don't know. I like this cost of living issue. The Democrat, we agree on that it's the big issue. People talk about that more than anything. Democrats call it affordability. I love that issue because everything the Democrats do, the political Democrats, the leader Democrats, everything they do increases the cost of living, especially with taxes. I mean, do they really want to talk about taxes? I mean, Pritzker Stratton have increased taxes in Illinois 65 times to the tune of $77 billion in the last 7 years or so. When they came into office, the entire budget in Illinois was only $36 billion, and yet they've added $77 billion, and they brag about balancing the budget because, they have basically a blank check to increase taxes because, their super majorities in the General Assembly are going to do whatever they want.
Well, Don, there's obviously going to be a lot more for us to talk about in the months ahead, so we will connect with that in the near future. Don Tracy, Republican candidate for Illinois U.S. Senate. Greatly appreciate you taking the time here with the states. Now, we did reach out for an interview with the campaign of Tracy's Democratic opponent, Illinois Lieutenant Governor Juliana Stratton. They declined at this time, but said they'd look for future opportunities. In response to Tracy saying Stratton's policies are too extreme for Illinois, Juliana for Illinois campaign spokesperson Allison Janowski said Don Tracy continues to march in lockstep with President Donald Trump, even as Illinois families are being crushed by his extreme, dangerous, and increasingly unpopular agenda. They went on to say that Tracy's been silent as Americans bear the price of Trump's reckless tariffs, trade wars, and unending conflict in the Middle East, and he refuses to stand up for Illinoisans when it counts. They further said Illinois deserves a fighter in the Senate, not another mouthpiece for the failing president. You can expect that and other races to determine which party controls Congress to heat up in the weeks and months ahead. We'll be right back with more.
It's a tiny little beautiful little car. I'm not sure I want to get hit by one of your Silverados, okay, or one of your Cadillacs, but you'll make them as safe as possible, right? You put a little cocoon around them. See, I would have been a wonderful automobile designer. But you have the right to do it, and they sell, inexpensively. They're actually beautiful. I don't know if I'm going to be using one. I'm not sure if Secret Service would love me driving around in one, but there's a tremendous market for it, I think.
That was President Donald Trump Monday urging U.S. car manufacturers to build smaller vehicles as he worked to defend in front of a crowd his economic and foreign policies. Welcome back to the States. I'm Greg Bishop. With the midterm elections now 98 days away, the president touting his record on tax, trade, and border policies before that cheering crowd in the swing state of Michigan. Now, in his speech at General Motors Milford Proving Ground, Trump said the country is winning like never before, casting controversial policies that Democrats have hammered him on, such as tariffs and the U.S.-Iran conflict, in a positive light. He credited his trade agenda with reviving American manufacturing by applying tariffs on goods manufactured in other countries.
My policy is simple. If you make your truck or your car in a foreign country, you have to pay for the privilege of sending it into our market and making a lot of money. But if you build in a factory in Michigan or someplace in our country and make your automobiles or trucks right here in America, you pay zero taxes, zero tariff. You pay zero tariff. There are no tariffs.
Now, the president didn't mention the lawsuit filed days earlier over his newest tariffs or the separate round of duties he imposed on Canada this month. Trump did say by having tariffs in place, he's encouraging more investment into making things here in the U.S.
In 4 long years of sleepy Joe Biden and his crazy administration, they're communists. They were communists. That was the beginning. He wasn't, because he had no idea what the hell was happening. They said, Joe, let's go communist. He said, what is that exactly? They got less than $1 trillion. So think of it. In 4 years, they had investment of less than $1 trillion. 4 years, less than $1 trillion. In 1 year, my administration secured commitments of more than $19.2 trillion from all over the globe. Think of that. 1 year, 19.2.
Now, congressional Democrats have bashed Trump's tariff policy, arguing it's worsened affordability, an issue they are focusing on in the midterms. The Nonpartisan Tax Policy Center puts the average tariff burden at about $920 per U.S. household in 2026. Trump supporters at that rally, however, think a short-term economic pinch is worth the promised gains. Chris Grabowski, a 62-year-old retired independent contractor from Michigan, told the Center Square's Therese Boudreau that the tariffs help prevent other countries from taking advantage of the U.S. He said that we've been abused and used because we're so gracious as a people and as a nation. That's the issue right there, and we can't do that anymore, he said. Now, the president touched on other issues that are top of mind for voters heading into the midterm elections, including the conflict in Iran. He says that the U.S. is winning.
People just don't see it. We have destroyed their Navy. We've destroyed their Air Force. We've destroyed their leadership. We've destroyed their anti-aircraft weaponry. Their drones are being made at a rate of about 7%. We destroyed most of their drone manufacturing capability, their missile manufacturing capability. And right now they're talking to us about making a deal. But if we didn't do it tough, there would be no talk. Now, you can't bribe them. You got to beat them, and we're beating the hell out of them. But we'll see how it turns out. Right now, they have very friendly negotiations going on. And by the way, how good is our Navy with a blockade? How good? Not one boat gets in.
Now, the president has said that Iran cannot have nuclear weapons. Liz Juergens, a 54-year-old sales worker from the southeastern part of Michigan, told the Center Square they agree with the president that the war in Iran is necessary to stop nuclear power over in Iran. Further on, the tariffs and the war in Iran impacting consumer prices, and that's something that the Federal Reserve is going to be watching closely. Now, aboard Air Force One yesterday, the president was asked about what he wants the central bank to do this week.
Don't forget, I inherited these. I haven't been here very long. I inherited the worst inflation in history from Biden. But costs are going down rapidly. And as soon as the war is over, you're going to see a big drop.
Are you worried that the Fed's going to hike rates to counter inflation?
Well, I have a board. And Kevin's fantastic, but he's got a board. And the board members are very political, I would say. So, we fight our way through the race because we're doing so well. But, no, he's got a board. He wants to do the right thing. I know what he wants to do. But you need the consent of some people that have perhaps bad intentions. Rates should be lowered.
Now we'll hear more about the impacts of trade, the war, and other economic pressures being sorted out by the Federal Reserve when we share more from the Center Square's Everyday Economics. That's coming up. But before that, an interesting story about whether an 88-year-old woman actually donated more than $150,000 to a Democratic political fundraising organization. That's next when we return with more from the Center Square.
We have additional evidence of ActBlue detecting at least 22 significant fraud campaigns. 9 of those fraud campaigns had a foreign nexus. After receiving this information, we deposed and interviewed 5 former ActBlue employees. When deposed, ActBlue employees refused to answer a single question. Instead, they invoked the Fifth Amendment 146 times. We gave ActBlue employees an opportunity to answer our questions, but they refused.
That was Wisconsin Republican U.S. Representative Brian Steele opening up a congressional hearing last month about the political fundraising operation ActBlue. The organization's facing more scrutiny after a recent report raised questions about thousands of political donations made in the name of an 88-year-old Michigan woman. Joining us to discuss this further is the Center Square reporter, Elise Apel. Elise, who is Elizabeth Waffle, and did she really donate more than $150,000 over 5 years?
Good morning, Greg. Thanks for having me on. That's the real question. So Elizabeth Waffle is an 88-year-old woman that lives in a small town, remote town in Michigan. She's actually currently living in a RV trailer because her house burned down 2 years ago. So this all came to light because of a Michigan Enjoyer reporter that went out and interviewed Elizabeth Waffle, because according to their numbers, she's given more than $150,000 via ActBlue. So that's the Democrats' kind of fundraising platform where they get money from especially smaller donors. And they fundraise nationally for Democrat candidates or progressive organizations. So the Michigan Enjoyer, according to their reporting, reported that she made almost 15,000 donations over the past 5 years, and totaling more than $150,000. Now, when I pulled the numbers myself, I looked at numbers more along the lines of 100,000. And range with donations about 12,900 donations coming from a woman named Elizabeth Waffle, and that's according to Federal Election Commission records. So definitely some numbers that were really interesting from a woman that doesn't own a computer. Kind of in this video that went viral over the weekend, they show her trying to fill out the ActBlue form, and her Wi-Fi is really spotty. So just lots of questions around, did this woman really give this money? And, no one really knows.
And again, you're delving into Federal Election Commission records to find donations allegedly made by Elizabeth Waffle. 12,900 donations is what you were able to confirm. That's a lot of donations.
It's a lot of donations over the past 5 years. So that's multiple donations per day.
And what's the range there? I mean, is it pennies to several dollars? I mean, how much are we talking?
No. So it's 24 cents to $107.50. So it really is kind of these smaller donations, lots of $5, $10 donations, just over and over again, every day, every month, for the past 5 years.
So what's going on here? If she says she didn't make these donations, I mean, her house just burned down. She's living in a trailer. She's 88 years old. I would imagine if she had $100,000, she'd probably rather use that to live. If she's not giving that money, what's going on here?
Yeah, so that was the interesting thing with the video. She never outright came and said that she did not make those donations. She said things along the lines of, I doubt it, I can't believe I did something like this, I don't have that kind of money. So that was the really interesting thing. And she actually did admit to giving money to ActBlue fairly regularly to different candidates, but she seemed to have no idea that it was in these kind of massive totals. And we had the chance to talk to ActBlue. They sent us a statement, the Center Square statement. And so we were able to talk to their external communications director, and she told us that ActBlue has reviewed all relevant contribution data, and our customer service team has already reached out to the donor for more information. It is standard operating procedure that we take corrective action when a non-compliant donation is identified, which may include but is not limited to blocking accounts from further contributions, issuing requested refunds to users, and reporting any fraudulent activity to the appropriate authorities. So basically, they made no statement about whether or not, Waffle's contributions were fraudulent, but did say that they are going to be talking to her.
It's interesting you got that statement from ActBlue. Being a media organization, we reach out to these groups that we end up writing about, and, they're not under oath, right? They can send you any statement they want. But when ActBlue was under oath in front of the U.S. House answering questions from Republican U.S. Representative Brian Steele, here's how that went.
After you sent me the 2023 letter, ActBlue weakened its fraud prevention rules twice in 2024. Quote, even after internal assessments confirmed that these policy changes would lead to more fraudulent donations, end quote. Did you weaken fraud prevention standards to increase donations on the ActBlue platform?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer the question pursuant to my Fifth Amendment rights under the Constitution.
So again, you got a statement from ActBlue, but you also tuned into that hearing last month. How many times did they give that Fifth Amendment response?
Dozens of times. They basically refused to answer almost any questions about this issue. So this is really, this is the big question for Republicans. What really is going on at ActBlue? And when they refuse to answer questions, it's hard to tell.
Now, this question may come out of left field for some people, but when we're talking about these questionable donations, this term comes up, and it's kind of an interesting one: smurfing. What is smurfing in the context of political donations?
Yeah, so in my reporting on this story, I was able to talk to Parker Thayer, who's an investigative researcher with the conservative nonprofit Capital Research Center, who they've been able to do a lot of different research into ActBlue. They've conducted multiple investigations. And something that Thayer talked about was this term called smurfing. And basically kind of the idea behind it is that on the FEC database, you basically have all the information to be able to give in that person's name. So they publish, when you go in to give money, say on ActBlue, all you need to know is an address, an employer, a name, and that is all just public information on the FEC website. So this term called smurfing is one where basically people allege that basically foreign money or larger donors are going into the FEC website and giving money fraudulently via these people's names that are just publicly available on the FEC website. Thayer said that maybe this case of the Michigan woman could be an example of smurfing, but obviously, there's no real proof of that. But he just flagged that this is a real issue that they've been trying to raise red flags about for a while.
Well, and you can see that with the case of Elizabeth Waffle. She says she has given to ActBlue in the past, doesn't think that she's given $150,000. How much exactly is legitimate? These are questions that they're trying to get to, even in the halls of Congress, not just there in Michigan, Elise. But finally here, last month, you've got during that congressional hearing, Texas Democratic U.S. Representative Julie Johnson critical of the hearing, being led by the Republican majority, questioning why the focus didn't include other organizations like Republicans Win Red. Here's her criticism.
Now they're trying to go after the money of Democratic small donors, the little mom and pops, the little teachers who send their $25 a month in to elect the candidates of their choice because they're terrified that they're going to lose in November. So my comment to the American people is vote, contribute through ActBlue, send money to your Democratic candidates, make sure that Democrats win in November so we can stop this nonsense once and for all.
Well, Elise, interesting question she raises. Are there similar concerns about Republican-led fundraising organizations?
Yeah, this was what Thayer told me, is that it could be very probable that WinRed has very similar problems to ActBlue. Now, the interesting thing with WinRed is it doesn't seem to just be as pushed out there as ActBlue. ActBlue, probably most people on the street, if you asked what ActBlue is, would be able to somewhat identify, that's how the Democrats make money. WinRed, I don't think most people know much about WinRed, and it doesn't seem to be a very effective fundraising tool for Republicans. So it seems like they could have some of the same issues, but it's just not as large scale as really ActBlue is.
Well, Elise, we'll be watching this closely, of course, because it is an election year and a pivotal midterm election. Money is going to be a key player in races all across the country, and I think it's important to follow that money. Greatly appreciate your time this morning here with The States. A series of elements have been dominating concerns about how various policies impact the economy, and some of those have been prevalent in the coverage here at the Center Square. Welcome back to The States. I'm Greg Bishop. For Everyday Economics this week, I talked with PhD economist Orphe Divounguy about 4 inflation accelerators that the Federal Reserve did not create, but they now own. We're talking about 4 inflation accelerators the Fed did not create, but they now own. Orphe, we talked previously about some of these, but even if the labor market stays balanced, you got 4 concurrent demands and cost shocks. War in the Middle East, tariffs imposed by the Trump administration, exploding fiscal deficits, which are taxpayer funded, and something else that is getting more attention, the AI data center boom. All these things pushing inflation risks higher. The question is no longer when will they cut, but how hard do they have to push back?
Yeah, I mean, we got a Fed meeting coming up this week. You know, war reaches consumers through more than oil, right? As the price of oil is shipping routes, when ships avoid critical routes, delivery times lengthen and transportation costs rise. Firms may then pay premium trucking and air freight costs to make up for lost time. Those higher costs eventually reach stores, factories, and consumers, right? So energy shocks can spread into airfares, food distribution, manufacturing, plastics and chemicals, delivery, and logistics. Then it's the tariffs. It started over a year ago now, but unfortunately, a lot of the tariffs collected at the border eventually get paid by consumers, right? Why? Because U.S. importers pay the tariffs. They absorb the cost at first, and then ultimately they pass it on. And so, you know, we have nearly half of firms that pay the tariff saying they still have to pass on those costs to consumers, and they will. And so that's pressure that isn't going away anytime soon. The AI boom is also an inflation story. AI is usually discussed as a productivity revolution, or you see it in the stock market and the big stock market story. But the investment boom is already pushing demand for chips, servers, electricity, construction workers, engineers higher, right? And so that is a big spend that's showing up on the demand side of the ledger. And then, of course, there's deficits. And deficits are really interesting because they do not automatically cause inflation. It could be when borrowing appears permanently funded, right? Unfunded, I should say, right? When there are no taxes or expected tax hikes or spending cuts coming in the future, then that's when higher deficits cause higher inflation, higher interest rates, or potentially both, right? The Treasury plans to spend $671 billion this quarter alone. And of course, that's going to put some upward pressure. And I think it's going to put upward pressure on inflation or interest rates because we very well know that the trajectory has been up and not down. We haven't had conversations about tax reform or spending cuts. Right? We know entitlement spending is on the rise. We know, right? You look at the trajectory of Social Security, that's a problem. We know that Americans are getting older, and so healthcare spending is on the rise. And so there's no real plan. And because there's no real plan, we're likely to see it in inflation and at the very least, higher interest rates. And that's basically the story here. Inflation expectations are also moving slightly higher. Household inflation expectations. 1-year inflation expectations are at 3.7%. 3-year at 3.3%. The Fed is not going to just look at that and do nothing, right? And that's the problem. So for now, maybe nothing in July. But if things continue that way, I expect maybe one rate hike in the near future. And sadly, I want to say sadly because it is sad, the Fed doesn't raise interest rates just once. It usually just goes in a sequence. And so if inflation continues to move higher and inflation expectations continue to move higher, if we see a reacceleration in the labor market, right, or labor shortages because unemployment is really low, then and you start to see wage growth picking up a little bit, then all bets are off. We might have to live in this higher interest rate, that higher for longer interest rate environment that everybody feared.
Orfe, a lot of things going on here, right? I mean, these four major shocks, several of them kind of as old as humanity is, right? I mean, war, you've got tariffs, and then you have government deficit spending. But it seems this new one that everybody's been top of mind is that AI build out and a lot of investment, $1.5 trillion announced.
Yes.
Right? I mean, that's nothing to sneeze at. But you even have the Fed governor in the July Beige book already linking it to higher chip, equipment, software, and specialty construction prices when it comes to the wages there. Again, delve a little bit more into just the overall impact on the economy from that
absolutely.
new, initiative.
In the short run, it's a ton of spending. Hopefully, and I say hopefully because it's not guaranteed. Hopefully, in the long run, you get a big boost in productivity that ends up reducing costs. Right? That's the big hope. But as of right now, it's a lot of spending, and that spending is essentially fuel to the inflation fire that hasn't fully died down yet from a few years ago, from the COVID pandemic, really, that basically reignited that fire.
Now, these shocks, some are, things that we just can't see what the end is going to be like, whether it's temporary, like the Middle East conflict with Iran and the impacts on oil. But do these shocks become sticky at any point? Do they stick around and then actually have much longer impacts?
Yeah, I think that's it. It's the impact that could become sticky if inflation expectations start to move higher. If households start to believe that oil prices will be higher next week, and that the price of everything else is going to continue to increase, well, the rational thing for households to do is to go out and buy all the stuff and store it now, right? And so that adds more fuel to the demand side of the inflation story.
And when it comes to, who owns this, some may argue that the taxpayers and the consumers ultimately are the ones holding the bag on all of this. But who ultimately owns the higher rate path? And what does that mean for Fed independence?
It's consumers, it's taxpayers. It's ultimately you're saying if you're not getting a higher tax bill, you're getting a higher inflation tax bill, right? So that's the bottom line. It's higher inflation, but it's also higher interest rates. For a couple of years now, we've kind of had this sluggish housing market because interest rates have remained elevated. The 10-year Treasury yield, a direct result of more and more borrowing by the federal government, right, is pushing rates higher, credit cards, mortgage rates. So when you look at that mortgage rate and you wonder why it is that you can't make that move just yet, all you have to do is look at what's going on in Washington, D.C. All you have to do is look at what's going on. What are those forces? I know a lot of people like to blame the Federal Reserve, but ultimately the Federal Reserve is only having to react to the fiscal policy forces at play, but also on top of the shocks. What are those shocks? A war that caused oil prices to increase, right? Tariffs that caused the price of everything to increase, right? And so you have
deficit spending that's caused the possibility of taxes and
spending that's out of control and that no one's talking about reining in. And so, when you think about all of those things that are happening in the U.S. economy that are keeping interest rates elevated, it's not the Fed. Ultimately, the Fed has to respond. And the only reason the Fed responds is because it needs to rein in inflation. It needs to make things affordable for households again. It needs to make sure the labor market remains stable, right? It needs to make sure that prices are not running up out of control, right? And so to some extent, I'm happy we have an independent Fed to try to rein in kind of the craziness that is causing all of this pain felt by everyday Americans.
Lorfe, I was going to wrap things up asking you to get out a crystal ball and give us an idea of what the rest of 2026 looks like. But we've got 6 more months till the end of the year, so we can delve into that deep question at another time. Greatly appreciate your time and your expertise as always. Dr. Orphe Divounguy, PhD economist. I'm Greg Bishop, and this is Everyday Economics, brought to you by the Center Square. Welcome back to the States. It's now time for America's Talking, with headlines from across the country that you can find in the description below or in your inbox with the Center Square newsletter, free at thecentersquare.com. Argent LNG announced it's received authorization from the U.S. Department of Energy to export up to 25 million metric tons of liquid natural gas annually, about 3.5 billion cubic feet per day, to countries that have free trade agreements with the United States. The Center Square energy industry reporter Alton Wallace reports DOE Order 5447 allows Argent to export LNG from its proposed shipping terminal about 70 miles southwest of New Orleans, where the company expects to begin operations in the first quarter of 2030. Now, if approved, Argent would become the only owner and operator of an LNG export terminal with a corporate headquarters in Louisiana. Argent's filed separately to export LNG to countries that do not have a free trade agreement with the United States, and this application remains under review. New Yorkers will get access to sharply discounted items at the city's future municipally owned grocery stores under a new initiative unveiled yesterday by New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani. Mamdani announced that the city is issuing a request for proposal for private operators to manage the day-to-day operations of 5 planned grocery stores run by the government. He said the stores will sell food at prices 30% cheaper than average retail stores, which will be available to shoppers regardless of their income. The Center Square contributor Chris Wade reports the discounts are tied to the estimated increase in food prices over the past 7 years, which Mamdani said have risen as wages have remained largely flat. The Mamdani administration says the discounted food prices could save households an estimated $90 per month, or more than $1,000 annually. But critics have questioned the claims and the hefty price tag for taxpayers for setting up government-run stores, which would have to compete with local and national grocery chains for market share to keep prices down for consumers. Speaking of taxpayer subsidies, nearly $750 million from taxpayers helped lure Ukraine-headquartered Skyton Inc. to North Carolina for its flagship manufacturing operation in America. The Center Square managing editor Alan Wooten reports the One North Carolina Fund provided $500,000 grant, and the commissioners in the Cumberland County and City Council of Fayetteville put forward performance-based economic development grants, each valued at $121,500. Skyton Inc., a 20-year-old company, builds and manufactures unmanned aerial systems. Las Vegas is home to its American headquarters. The investment in Fayetteville, more than $3.1 million. One North Carolina Fund assistance requires matching participation from the local government entities. No money's given up front. Rather, job creation and capital investment is required to gain a payment. And automated license plate readers, also known as flock cameras, have no place in Tennessee's Knox County. That's according to Mayor Glenn Jacobs. Center Square associate editor Kim Jarrett reports Jacobs and Knox County Commissioner Adam Thompson said in a joint statement that they have concerns about the devices. The county commission and the sheriff's office approved a state grant for the devices made by Atlanta-based Flock Safety in November, but since, Jacobs and Thompson said new privacy and data retention concerns were raised. Jacobs and Thompson are asking the Tennessee General Assembly and the U.S. Congress to consider actions regarding the cameras. Republican U.S. Representative Tim Burchett is proposing a bill called the Protection Against Mass Surveillance Act that would eliminate federal funding for the flock cameras. He said the cameras violate the Fourth Amendment, which prohibits warrantless searches. And that's just some of what America is talking about. Get these and other headlines at thecentersquare.com. From my studios in Central Illinois, I'm Greg Bishop. Join us back here Wednesday for more stories impacting you, the taxpayer, from around the country, only with the states, powered by the Center Square.